if you were to go back to ancient cultures, you should feel fairly welcome in them. Like, oh, I think like them pretty clearly. Their value system is mostly my value system and everything, because they're not Christianity. But if there's these kind of universal ideas that exist around there, there should be some connection on that point. But what you're saying is that with Tom Holland, he said he when actually studying them and trying to delve into them, he's like, realize it's sort of like going to an alien culture. If you get rid of Christianity, what takes its place? And it doesn't, apparently it's not this just atheistic utopia.
Welcome to the Circle Dwellers podcast, a production of the Protestant Monastic Order of Life Mission Fellowship. This is a show about living out the gospel in an intentional Christian community. My name is Matt Krell, and I'm back here with my brother in Christ and in blood, Timothy Krell.
Hey, Matt.
So, Tim, this is a legitimate question because I actually don't know the answer. Have you listened to the Rest is History podcast?
I've listened to a couple episodes, yeah.
Oh, okay. I keep seeing it mentioned because I follow Tom Holland on Twitter, but I've never actually listened to it. So yeah.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's starting to come up in my feed more and more. I need to train the YouTube algorithm to recommend it to me so that I can actually watch them every once in a while.
Okay, that's a good idea.
But it's a lot of fun. They had a really fun one about the Mary, is it Mary Queen of Scots, or I'm totally butchering it now, but there's a really interesting, like the murder case, ancient murder case with one of the royals of Great Britain. I think was Mary Queen of Scots.
Well, Mary Queen of Scots would be around Renaissance times, because she preceded Elizabeth I. So
yeah.
Ancient. Maybe the Normans we're talking about? Or
no. This is around. Did I say ancient?
You did.
I mean, like, more than 100 years ago. it's ancient.
Yeah, it's always funny, like when you're watching Star Trek and they refer to ancient Earth, and it's like Old West or something. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. Back before they had internet.
Yes, which is ancient times. And you guys were all hunting dinosaurs and such. Yeah. Right. Anyway, well, the reason I brought it up is because if you enjoyed that podcast, and Tom Holland is an excellent historian, you would probably very much like Tom Holland's seminal work, which is Dominion. The full title is Dominion: How the Christian Revolution Remade the World. So I recently finished this. We actually have a how do we call it, a members education list where we all read the same set of books as part of our our religious education and part of our religious life. And yeah, this is one of the ones on there, I believe. And so I just recently finished it, and it's awesome. And I thought it would be a really good episode to kind of talk about that, because it definitely intersects quite a bit with what we talk about on this podcast, which is both Christian culture and art, and as well as occasionally history and that sort of thing. So so I thought it'd be really cool to talk about what he is discussing in this book and his essential thesis, because it's something that I certainly agree with after reading his book. And I think that's something that's very, very important for Christians and even late non-Christians to be aware of. And his thesis is that everything that you think of in the West, your morality system, the things that you value, your assumptions about how government should be run, ultimately have their origins in Christianity, whether you realize it or not. And the reason Holland can say this so confidently is because he used to be Christian. He fell away from the faith, a very typical story. But as he was going through history and reading and studying these different cultures, he started to realize, I don't share any of these people's values. Like, there's almost nothing that I have in common with the Trojans. As much as I admire them, I don't value what they value. And so he started doing this long research project on where these different values that he believed in, even as an atheist, came from. And ultimately, it comes from Christianity. And so he is very objectively and scientifically just laying out the origins of all these different ideas that we just take for granted in history.
So because like I guess the idea, you kind of have this thought, if you were to sign on to atheism, that, and even as a Christian, I think you can kind of get into this kind of mode of thinking pretty easily because of just the secularization of everything. But the idea is that there's sort of these universal principles and stuff, and if you're not subscribing necessarily to Christianity, you're not going to go to church on Sunday, you're not going to pray to Christ and all those different things that a very straw manning of the Christian faith you might think of as like, oh, this is what it means to be a Christian. You think, oh, I'll just leave all that aside, but you do actually have all these values and things that you care about. And like what you're saying is, you would think, if that's the case, if these are these universal principles, and you can kind of just leave Christianity to the side and still just kind of adhere to those universal principles. If you were to go back to ancient cultures, you should feel fairly welcome in them. Like, oh, I think like them pretty clearly. Their value system is mostly my value system and everything, because they're not Christianity. But if there's these kind of universal ideas that exist around there, there should be some connection on that point. But what you're saying is that with Tom Holland, he said when actually studying them and trying to delve into them, he's like, realize it's sort of like going to an alien culture. That's just like, they don't, their path, their way of reasoning, their standards, their value system just does not match his at all, is what he's saying.
No, absolutely. I have to be a little bit careful about what I talk about here, because this is a family show, so I don't want to get too spicy on anything. So do you want to give some examples so that something that the audience can latch on to? But one big one, for example, is among the Trojans, at least, strength is considered like the primary virtue. And if you're weak, then you're basically not useful to society, very literally not useful to society. And the way society is built and sustained is by people being strong. So if you're weak or sickly or poor, for example, you're pushed to the side. You're looked down on because you literally do not contribute to helping to the society. Let's take on the issue of equality. Okay, so women, if they're not considered outright property, if you're a slave, if you're not considered outright property, basically that's just your destiny. Like, men are considered superior to women in that there's just this natural hierarchy, and there isn't an equality there. I'm trying to articulate exactly how they thought about it. But it's more that because you are a barbarian or a slave or a woman or any of these different categories, you literally cannot rise above a particular station, because how the universe is architected is such that certain people are designed to be masters and other people are designed to be slaves. Right? There is no possible situation in which someone who is born into this particular slave position can rise to be master. And if he does rise to be master, you get all sorts of problems, slave revolts and all sorts of bad things, because these people are literally not capable of being masters. Right? So that's one example.
Okay. Yeah. So there's just like, you're born to be a slave. You're like, you're genetically designed to be that way.
Yeah. If you read like Aristotle and different things, like that's kind of how he thinks about it. And he'll say it pretty much exactly. I think it could be expressed very aptly with a line from that great movie, The Scarlet and the Black. There's a part where the priest of Flaherty, he's talking to the SS officer, and he says, as he's storming out at the Colosseum about something, you've watched the movie, it's a whole plot.
Don't you talk to me about God and humanity. I know what humanity is. It's one half with the power and the will to use it, and the other half only cattle to be led.
Oh,
now,
right, yeah.
This guy's obviously, a German National Socialist, but that is basically a pagan thought. That is literally how the pagans thought about things. The Greeks, they thought that way. The Romans, they all thought the way. That was assumed, common knowledge throughout all of human history. Another example, human sacrifice. All right. Sacrifice is a very common thing throughout all of history, but human sacrifice, it just makes sense. Like if you're going to conquer another people and to assert your dominance, well, it just makes sense that you would go and publicly sacrifice their leaders and hang them on poles and such, because by doing so, you're showing the world that you are literally killing the gods of the other people, right? And offering them to your ideas, your gods, and thereby uniting and consolidating the people you've conquered. And it's just good common sense to go do that, right? Because you don't want people to revolt, right? Like that would just cause even more bloodshed and destruction. So no, of course you're going to brutally murder and execute your opponents to the gods. Like it just makes sense, right? Another great example, and this is one that catches everybody off guard, sexual ethics. They do not consider intimacy in the way that we do. In fact, intimacy and love and the conception that we think of it, not even really a concept, actually. There's attraction, sure, but that's not really important. Though the only calculus when it comes to sexual ethics is who's on top and who's on the bottom, who's the dominant position, who's in the inferior position. And so that relates to male and female, obviously, but it's the whole system is simply calculated along that. And so, again, I have to be extremely careful what I talk about here because this is a family show. But yeah, when you look into like how the Romans thought about all this stuff, it's really built on that concept. The idea of, say, like gay or straight, that literally doesn't exist in the Roman system because it's about these power dynamics, not about like who you happen to be attracted to. I hope I'm articulating that clearly.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So like what Holland is talking about then is he kind of takes you through this world, this whole pagan world and these different iterations of that, and the ancient Mesopotamians, and then the Romans and the Greeks and so forth. And he kind of carries you through those cultures onto the most important events that kind of illustrate these ideas, right? And then we get to the Jews and their particular.
Can I just pause you there to interrupt with a thought
sure,
that just
absolutely
popped in my head? Was what with those kind of pagan value systems. I do wonder too, like, do you think, I don't know if he talks about this in the book, but do you think that, I wonder if hearing like you list those out, some people might think like, I don't know, those don't sound too bad necessarily, like, or like and there's sort of a exalting of pagan in the culture, like like for example, like Christianity is always dunked on and considered like stupid and silly in popular culture stories, right? But like when people are going to go make like a religious thing like Battlestar Galactica, right? Like they love making like, they're all the Greek gods and stuff like those, feel really, oh, that's interesting though, even though I'm an atheist, like there's something cool about that, but I wonder, do you think like people don't necessarily, is it one of those things where on paper they might see those values and think like, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, but like it's when the rubber hits the road, they would not want to live their life like that,
That's a great question. I think for most people, yes. And probably that kind of neo-pagan thing that you see online can be more of a LARPing aesthetic, perhaps. But there is at least a subsection of people who would actually embrace that unironically. I'm going to drop a name drop here, despite the fact that I have not actually interacted with this guy very much. I just know just enough about it to know that this would apply. Bronze Age Pervert. I don't know if you heard of him. No. Okay. Well, basically, his whole thing, as far as I understand it, is kind of re-embracing the aesthetics and virtues of the Bronze Age, the kind of Homerian epic strongman idea of masculinity as a response to the weakness of the longhouse, where you just do as you're told, and the longhouse mother just bossing you around, right? It's kind of breaking out of that particular idea, and it is very much a deliberately pagan perspective. And so I'm sure, like, if he were to hear some of these things that Holland is talking about, he would just unironically say, yes, that's absolutely what you should be doing. He might justify it slightly differently, but it is, I think he would say, yeah, for sure. Now, again, I haven't actually interacted with this guy that much, so I could be getting something wrong. But I do know that that kind of subculture does exist, and you can find it. But for most people, I would say yes. They look at the pagan world and they kind of admire this at that kind of teenage sort of perspective, like, oh, that's Vikings cool kind of thing. But then they go and watch a movie like The Northman from Robert Eggers, where this kind of morality is on full display about vengeance and so forth. And they're revolted by it because they're Christians without them realizing it. They're cultural Christians. And Holland actually commented on a video with Richard Dawkins, of all people, where Richard Dawkins was being interviewed by someone about something. I don't remember specifically what. And Dawkins was saying, like, even though I'm not a Christian, I don't believe in God, and I think he's evil, I am a cultural Christian. Like, I have these perspectives and ideas that come from Christianity. And he's been saying this for a long time, by the way. This is not something new. And so people have, like, wondered, like, Dawkins, seriously? Like, you're saying that? Like, how could you possibly say that? The guy who wrote the book, The God Delusion, how can that make sense? Well, what Holland has replied in times, and this is a quote from one of his tweets, is, well, not really, because secularism and Dawkins' own brand of evangelical atheism are both expressions of an specifically Christian culture, as Dawkins himself, sitting on the branch he's been sawing through and gazing nervously at the ground far below, seems to have begun to realize.
That's Holland said that?
That's Holland.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's they're realizing, I mean, especially with the rise of Islam and everything, they completely realize that, if you get rid of Christianity, what takes its place? And it doesn't, apparently it's not this just atheistic utopia. They're like, it's like, wait a minute, they're starting to take the position of like in politics, is it it's late at night, so my brain's not working now, but who's the one who says that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others?
That might be Churchill, but
isn't it Churchill? Doesn't Churchill say that? I think
Winston Churchill. Yep,
it is Churchill. Yeah, okay, yeah. I don't know if that was like a thing he said, but it's actually from like somebody else too. But yeah, so like they kind of have that with like Christianity, where they say like Christianity is the worst religion except for all the others, including atheism, like that's,
well, we'll take it, but still.
But that's kind of like, it seems like where a lot of them are starting to land, where it's just like, it's wrong, it's not true, and it's terrible, but apparently you can't live in society without it because everything just goes terrible and becomes apocalyptic if we don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. my response to that, to those people, and they're absolutely correct, and I agree with them, but who's going to sing the hymns? Who's going to go to the churches? Who's going to build these cathedrals, if not for the people who actually believe it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well, and there's sort of there's a really weird kind of framing there, that because it's sort of like, because there's sort of, I'm talking about like the Dawkinses. It seems like they're being dragged kicking and screaming into saying like, well, okay, you know, maybe Christianity sort of acts as a you know,
it's a good
an inoculation against a lot of worse things, you know, essentially,
yeah, exactly.
in society. But there's sort of this, then it's sort of like, well, I'm the only smart person who can realize that there isn't a God and that we don't need that. But everybody, all the there's so many stupid people in society that
they need religion and for this thing to hold together.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and so all those lesser people who are not as amazing as me with my amazing intellectual brain need that crutch, you know, to survive, which is just, I don't know. It's so condescending.
It's very condescending. But we should talk about, though, like how the modern age comes about because of Christianity, because there is this understanding that knows the Enlightenment ideas for all these concepts, human rights and such. But no, as Holland points out, history changed radically when Christ was brutally murdered on a Roman cross. I mean, crucifixion was so awful, the Romans didn't talk about it. Literally, the only historical record, I believe, that we have of how it was done is the Gospels, because only Christians talked about this stuff and what happened. So that itself shows you how radical this is, that all of a sudden this brutally murdered slave practically is now being considered the epitome of virtue, right? Weakness is being considered the epitome of virtue, and God's mercy being raised up above power. And in addition to that, time is now being seen as linear, not circular or cyclical. If you read the Greeks, you read lots of ancient texts, they always see as history always repeating itself, just in a different form, right? Not the Christian perspective. The Christian perspective is a line, is that there is a point and we are heading to something. There is a destiny we are arriving to. So what happens? Well, human rights. Okay, the concept of human rights. That comes from Paul, because in Paul, there is no slave or free. There is no Jew or Greek. There is no man or woman. What Paul is doing is saying that the hierarchies that you're used to under Christ, they're the same. Men are equal under Christ. Now, Paul himself didn't mean like we're literally equals, as in the same, right? Paul still acknowledged that biology is a factor, society is a factor, there are these important things that exist in reality that you can measure scientifically. But under Christ, our value as people, that is the same. And so out of that concept, you get to the Middle Ages, where we start building universities and people are doing science, and they start seeing the natural order of the world around them. And then out of that natural law theology that comes out of these Christian universities, we get the concept of human rights, that every person, because they're made in the image of God, actually has a set of rights that cannot be taken away from them, that are fundamental to them as a person. Completely new thought in history. Another good example, church and state. Okay, we just take that for granted. The church shouldn't be talking to the state shouldn't be talking to the church, right? Now, many people, the separation of church and state means that actually the state can do whatever it jolly well wants and the church has to shut up. All right, so, we could get into that sometime. But anyway, yes, separation. We like it. It's good. But the reason this happened is because the Pope and the Emperor got into a fisticuffs around the 11th century about who could appoint bishops in the Holy Roman Empire. And no, you're not allowed to quote Voltaire, because I'm sick of that quote. Anyway, science. Aquinas, okay? Aquinas, he was taking a lot of these Aristotelian ideas. They were reading all these ancient texts and reviving them. This was, by the way, in the 1200s thereabouts, so before the Renaissance. Anyway, reading all these science stuff, and he was putting these things together, and the church was celebrating that and publishing these works. No concept of the church censoring science, not really a thing. In fact, here's a little factoid for you guys. The reason Galileo got into a spat with the Pope wasn't because the Pope was anti-science. It was because Galileo was saying that he could prove heliocentricity, right? The church was saying, heliocentricity is a possibility, but not the only possibility, right? No. What Galileo was saying is that, no, I can prove that it was, and that that the Earth goes around the sun. And he just also happened to be a pretty abrasive person as well. So, he got into a lot of fights and spats with people. In fact, he actually mocked the Pope at one time, which, that's not a really good idea to mock your patron. So that's how he got arrested, and the rest is history, you might say. See what I did there? Your video cut out. I'm not sure what's going on, but
there we go. My battery died on my phone.
Okay, we're back. But what I was saying, Galileo is a cool guy. The church actually did like him. The only difference is that he just started attacking the Pope, and he was kind of arrogant and things. And so that's why he got into trouble. It was a whole big mess, but it wasn't because the church didn't like science. Go read your history book, people. That's too simplistic. All right. Final best example of the things of how stuff was changed because of Christianity. Weakness, powerlessness. All right. The modern NGO idea of helping the weak and the poor and people who are disadvantaged in that's Christianity. Prior to Christianity, the reason you would do these things is because it consolidates your power, right? Being generous with your wealth to people in need, that's fine. That's good. There's all sorts of pagans who do that stuff and talk about it. But the reason you do that is to increase your political power and to increase your status in society. It is not because that person deserves it. Not a concept. Even the glorification of victimhood, as we see, like, hey, I am suffering. Aren't I a good person, right? That whole concept that you see, that comes from Christianity, baby.
Yeah.
It's a perversion of it, but it does come from that. It used
to be if you were you were just the weak and you just should be discarded from society because you couldn't make it.
Exactly. But that concept that we have now, which we just take for granted, it comes from Christianity, from that idea of powerlessness being the virtue, not power. It all comes back to Jesus dying on a cross. So I think what Holland concludes his book with is concept. He doesn't say whether or not these values are good. He's not making that judgment at all. What he's doing as a historian is simply trying to tell you that the reason you think these things is because of Christianity. And you can take that and interpret it as you like. As far as I know, Holland himself, while being respectful of the faith, is still not himself a Christian. Although you will find him on podcasts with N.T. Wright and such to talk about this stuff because he does really firmly believe it. But he's very careful to say that he's not making a moral judgment about anything, nor does he say that anything good exists because of Christianity. He's not saying that. He's just saying that the core identity that we have in the West really comes from Christianity, and it cannot be separated from it.
Yeah. So does he talk about it all in the book? Like, if these ideas came from Christianity, does he think it's a fool's errand to say, well, we can just hold on to those ideas but get rid of Christianity?
He doesn't go that far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he doesn't.
He's just saying, well, this is the origin of them. Take, do with that what you will, but don't assume that they came from anywhere else except here.
Exactly.
Originally. Yeah.
And his kind of teasing online, like with Dawkins, is him just making that point, trying to get people to realize what is the origin of their thoughts. In fact, one of the things he'll do is some news article will come up about some activist cause going disastrously horribly wrong, and then he'll reply with some biblically worded phrase that kind of illustrates the point, basically. And that's his kind of snarky way of saying, yes, see, aren't I right? Dominion is, this is another evidence that Dominion is, the thesis of Dominion is correct.
I feel like, I don't know, I feel like typically when I see atheists argue, they tend to want to dispute the fact that those came from Christianity.
Absolutely.
I think is more the typical thing. I don't know if Alex O'Connor necessarily would, but I it's interesting. I wonder if there's any atheists who will take Tom Holland and say, yes, Tom Holland's 100% correct. That's where all this came from. But we don't need it. I'm not sure if I've ever heard
enough that we don't need to.
Yeah, I feel like Alex O'Connor's probably clever enough where he might try to take that tact at some point, maybe. But he's the only one that I would think of, because I feel like most of them they generally just don't want to admit that it came from Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly from our reply to that is you cannot have the substance without the thing that generated the substance. There is no possible situation where you can hold on to these values and expect them to keep going with that while cutting out the branch.
Yeah,
you can't
I think that's sort of been some of the dilemma of the new atheist movement now, and it's just they're kind of running up to the thing of just realizing it just doesn't seem to be possible to divorce that. Like, exactly. It seems like in general something else is going to take its place.
Exactly. And that thing is not built on the enlightened reason that you expect it to be. It's going to be this other pagan perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I highly recommend the book. It's great. This is not a plug for Audible, but I did listen to it on Audible. That's a fantastic way to get stuff done. But
unless Audible wants to pay us,
if they want to pay us. Sure. The show was not brought to you by Audible. We certainly wish it was. Anyway, cool. Anyway, I'm wearing this cool shirt. It has Shakespeare on it. It's a pretty fun episode if you want to go find out what we think about that, but certainly to get your Western culture chops would be a good idea. And Shakespeare's really great because he actually understands implicitly everything that Holland is saying here. You can read through his Roman plays, and it's kind of a exploration of how Christianity comes about on the scene. Actually, it's very fascinating exploration of that.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
So anyway, click on that video next, and we'll see you guys over there.
Yeah, thank you for your attention, everyone. Have a blessed day.